the boy who spoke to ravens. In a remote, windswept village named Hrafnsvik, nestled deep within a fjord where the mountains met the churning sea, lived a boy named Eirik. He was an orphan, a quiet, solitary figure whose presence often went unnoticed, or, when it was met with a wary glance. Eirik never spoke to people. His voice, if he had one, was a mystery, a silence that had settled upon him after the great sickness that claimed his parents when he was but a small child. The villagers, steeped in ancient lore and superstition, whispered that he was cursed, or touched by the darker spirits of the forest. They kept their distance, their fear a palpable barrier around him. Yet, Eirik was not truly silent. He found his voice not among humans, but among the birds. He spent his days on the fringes of the village, wandering through the sparse, gnarled forests or sitting by the gray, tumultuous sea. And wherever he went, the birds seemed to follow. Small, chirping sparrows would land on his outstretched hand, their tiny hearts beating against his palm. Majestic eagles would circle high above him, their piercing cries a distant greeting. But his deepest, most profound connection was with two particular ravens. They were magnificent creatures, larger than any other ravens Eirik had ever seen, with feathers the color of polished obsidian that shimmered with hints of deep violet and emerald in the pale northern light. Their eyes, intelligent and ancient, held a knowing gaze that seemed to pierce through the veil of the ordinary. They visited him every morning, landing silently on the gnarled branch of an ancient fir tree near his small, isolated hut, their presence a comforting weight in the quiet dawn. Villagers whispered that these ravens were ill omens, harbingers of misfortune, drawn to Eirik's supposed curse. But the truth was far older, woven into the very fabric of the Norse cosmos. Eirik bore the faint, distant blood of Odin, the All-Father himself. And the ravens were none other than Hugin and Munin, Odin's own thought and memory, scouting the world not for misfortune, but for wisdom, for knowledge, for the subtle shifts in the tapestry of fate. They spoke to Eirik not in human words, but in a language of clicks, cause, and subtle shifts of their heads, a language that Eirik, in his silence, instinctively understood. He learned their names from the whispers they sent to his mind, a silent resonance that bypassed the need for spoken words. Hugin, whose presence felt like a sudden clarity, a sharp insight. Munin, whose presence brought a sense of deep remembrance, an echo of ancient truths. They would share with him glimpses of the wider world, the melting of distant glaciers, the migration of vast herds across the tundra, the quiet growth of new forests on ancient battlegrounds. These were not frightening visions, but serene observations, painting a picture of a world in constant, gentle motion. Eirik's life was simple, yet rich in its own way. He gathered berries and roots from the forest, fished in the quiet coves of the fjord, and tended a small, hidden garden where hardy herbs grew. His hut, a humble structure of rough timber and turf, was a sanctuary of peace, filled with the quiet rustle of dried leaves and the faint scent of pine. He felt no loneliness, for the natural world was his companion, and the ravens were his silent mentors, his connection to something vast and ancient. The villagers, however, saw only his silence, his solitude, and the unnerving presence of the ravens. They avoided him at the communal well, averted their gaze when he passed, and spoke in hushed tones whenever his name was mentioned. Their fear was a heavy cloak, wrapping around Eirik, making him an outcast in his own home. He felt their apprehension, a subtle chill in the air around them, but he understood it was born of ignorance, not malice. He simply continued his quiet life, observing, listening, waiting. One crisp autumn morning, as the first frost painted the longhouse roofs in shimmering white, Hugin and Munin arrived at Eirik's hut with an unusual urgency. Their caws were sharper, their movements more agitated. Eirik felt a ripple of unease, a discordant note in their usual calm communication. He listened intently, his mind open to their silent whispers. The ravens showed him images, distant figures, cloaked and shadowed, moving with a predatory slowness through the northern passes. They were not the familiar hunters of the neighboring clans, nor the occasional traders. These figures radiated a coldness, a hunger that chilled Eirik to the bone. They were raiders, drawn by the whispers of a prosperous harvest in Hrafnsvik, seeking to plunder and destroy. Eirik felt a surge of fear, a primal instinct to flee, to hide in the deepest parts of the forest. But then, Hugin sent him an image, the faces of the villagers, drawn with fear, their homes burning, their children crying. And Munin sent him a memory, a flash of Odin's eye, wise and ancient, a faint echo of divine power stirring within his own veins. The ravens were not just messengers, they were reminding him of his lineage, of the dormant magic that flowed within him, a magic he had never dared to acknowledge. He had always suppressed it, this strange sensitivity, this ability to understand the whispers of the wind, the language of the birds, the subtle pulse of the earth. He had feared it would only deepen the villagers' suspicion, confirm their belief that he was cursed. But now, as danger approached, he knew he could no longer ignore it. He had to embrace the divine magic in his veins, to learn from the raven's cryptic words, and only then could he protect those who once feared him. His first task was to understand the raven's message more clearly. They showed him the raiders' path, a winding trail through a narrow mountain pass, heavily forested on either side. They showed him their numbers, their weapons, their intent. It was a small band, but ruthless, well-armed, and driven by hunger. Hrafnsvik, unprepared for such an attack, would be vulnerable. Eirik spent the day in intense communion with Hugin and Munin. They taught him how to focus his senses, to extend his awareness beyond his immediate surroundings. He learned to feel the subtle vibrations in the earth that spoke of distant footsteps, to interpret the rustle of leaves not just as wind, but as a warning. He learned to see the patterns in the flight of smaller birds, understanding their alarm calls as a complex language of approaching threats. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the valley, Eirik knew he had to act. He could not speak to the villagers in their own tongue, could not explain the unseen danger, but he could show them. He gathered a handful of smooth, gray pebbles from the riverbed, and with a quiet determination, he began to arrange them on the ground outside his hut. He arranged the pebbles in a pattern that mirrored the raiders' approach, a long, winding line representing the mountain pass, smaller stones marking the raiders' positions, and a larger stone representing Hrafnsvik. He then used twigs to represent the forest, and a small, sharp stone to denote the raiders' weapons. It was a silent map, a visual warning. He waited. As dusk deepened, a few villagers, driven by curiosity or a lingering sense of unease, began to approach his hut. They saw the strange arrangement of stones and twigs, and their whispers grew louder, tinged with suspicion. Eirik ignored their murmurs, his gaze fixed on the path leading from the village. Then Ragnar, the elder who had told Astrid tales of Joseph, approached. His eyes, wise and ancient, held no fear, only a quiet curiosity. He knelt beside Eirik, studying the arrangement of stones. He saw the winding path, the small, sharp stone, the clear depiction of danger. He looked at Eirik, his gaze searching, and saw not a cursed boy, but a silent messenger. Ragnar placed a gnarled hand on Eirik's shoulder. "What is it, Eirik?" he murmured, his voice soft. Eirik could not speak, but he looked at Ragnar, then at the arrangement of stones, and then he looked up at the sky, where Hugin and Munin circled silently, their dark forms almost invisible against the deepening twilight. Ragnar followed his gaze, and a flicker of understanding crossed his face. He recognized the ravens, not as omens of ill, but as the ancient companions of the All-Father. Ragnar stood, his voice now clear and strong. "Gather the men," he called to the villagers, his voice echoing through the valley. "There is danger approaching from the mountain pass. Eirik has shown us." The villagers hesitated, their faces etched with doubt. But Ragnar's authority was unquestioned. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to gather their weapons: axes, spears, fishing harpoons. They did not understand, but they trusted Ragnar. Eirik knew it was not enough. The raiders were swift, and the village was unprepared. He had to slow them down, to create a diversion. He looked at Hugin and Munnin, and they sent him a new image: a narrow, rocky section of the mountain pass prone to small rock slides. He ran, his silent feet swift over the uneven ground, back towards the mountain. He felt the ravens flying above him, their presence a guiding force. He reached the narrow pass, his breath ragged, his muscles screaming. He found a precarious pile of loose rocks, balanced precariously on the slope above the trail. He closed his eyes, focusing all his will. He remembered the faint tremor of the earth he had felt on the plateau, the subtle pulse of the land. He reached out with his mind, not to command, but to encourage, to whisper to the stones, to invite them to shift, to release their ancient grip. It was a strange, subtle magic, a resonance with the earth itself. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ground beneath the rocks began to tremble. A small stone detached, then another. Then, with a low rumble, a cascade of rocks tumbled down the slope, blocking the narrow pass. It was not a massive landslide, but enough to impede the raiders, to force them to slow, to find another way around. Eirik hid among the trees, watching as the raiders approached the blocked pass. Their shouts of frustration echoed through the night. They were delayed, confused. He had bought his village precious time. He returned to Hrafnsvik, exhausted but resolute. The villagers were now organized, their faces grim but determined. Ragnar stood at the head of the armed men, his gaze fixed on the mountain pass. He saw Eirik emerge from the shadows, his clothes torn, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes burning with a quiet fire. Ragnar nodded, a silent acknowledgement of Eirik's courage. "He has bought us time," he announced to the villagers. "Prepare for their arrival." The battle, when it came, was swift and brutal. The raiders, delayed and disoriented by the rockslide, were met by a prepared and determined defense. Eirik, guided by the ravens, moved through the shadows, a silent guardian. Hugin and Munnin circled above, their cause now sharp warnings, guiding the villagers to vulnerable points, revealing the raiders' hidden movements. Eirik, using his heightened senses, would anticipate their attacks, subtly nudging a warrior to duck, or alerting another to a flanking maneuver. He did not fight with axe or spear, but with knowledge, with understanding, with the subtle magic of his lineage. By dawn, the raiders were routed, their numbers decimated, their retreat swift and disorganized. Hrafnsvik was safe, its longhouses standing, its people unharmed. A collective sigh of relief swept through the village, mingling with the crisp morning air. The villagers looked at Eirik, not with fear, but with awe, with a dawning understanding. They saw not a cursed boy, but a silent protector, a guardian who had saved them from destruction. Ragnar approached him, his face etched with gratitude. He placed both hands on Eirik's shoulders, his gaze steady. "You saved us, Eirik," Ragnar said, his voice thick with emotion. "You, who never speak, have spoken the loudest truth of all." Eirik looked at the villagers, their faces now open, no longer veiled by fear. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sense of belonging he had never known. He still could not speak in human words, but he knew, with a quiet certainty, that he had found his place. The ravens, Hugin and Munnin, circled once more above the village, their caws now soft, contented sounds, a silent blessing on Hrafnsvik. Eirik looked up at them, and for the first time, A faint, gentle smile touched his lips. He had embraced the divine magic in his veins, learned from the cryptic words of the ravens, and protected those who once feared him. His silence was no longer a barrier, but a testament to a deeper, ancient connection. The days that followed the raid were filled with a quiet rebuilding, not of damaged structures, but of shattered perceptions. The villagers of Hrafnsvik, having witnessed Eirik's silent courage and the undeniable aid of his raven companions, began to dismantle the walls of fear and suspicion they had built around him. Children, once hushed and pulled away from his presence, now approached him with hesitant curiosity, their eyes wide with wonder at the boy who spoke to birds. Eirik, in turn, began to open himself slowly to this newfound acceptance. He still did not speak human words, but his gestures became more open, his gaze softer. He would share his knowledge of the forest with the hunters, silently pointing out game trails or indicating the presence of rare herbs. He would sit by the fishing boats, his keen eyes spotting the subtle movements of fish beneath the water, guiding the fishermen to bountiful catches. His contributions were always quiet, always offered without expectation, yet they were invaluable. Hugin and Munin continued their daily visits, their presence now a familiar and comforting sight to the entire village. They would perch on the longhouse roofs, their dark forms silhouetted against the sky, their cause no longer whispers of warning, but gentle murmurs of observation. Eirik would often sit outside his hut, a small wooden carving in his hands, listening to their silent reports, his mind a quiet receiver for their cosmic wisdom. They showed him the slow, steady recovery of the land after the raiders' passage, the gentle return of balance to the wider world. Ragnar, the elder, became Eirik's most steadfast advocate. He would tell the story of the raid not as a tale of human strength alone, but as a testament to the ancient bonds between their people and the unseen forces of the world, personified by Eirik and his ravens. He is not cursed, Ragnar would declare, his voice resonating with conviction, but blessed. He carries the wisdom of the Allfather, a silent guardian sent to watch over us. These words, spoken with the authority of a respected elder, slowly began to reshape the villagers' understanding. As the seasons turned, Eirik's connection to his divine lineage deepened. He began to perceive the subtle currents of magic that flowed through Midgard, the ancient power within the earth, the ethereal energy of the aurora, the deep wisdom held within the very stones. He learned to draw upon this magic, not for grand displays, but for quiet, practical purposes. He could soothe a restless animal with a gentle touch, encourage a wilting plant to thrive with a silent intention, or guide a lost child through the forest with an almost invisible presence. His magic was a gentle hum, a quiet harmony with the natural world. One harsh winter, a sickness swept through Hrafnsvik, a fever that left the villagers weak and listless. The healers, skilled in their craft, struggled to find remedies. Eirik, guided by Munin's memories of ancient cures and Hugin's insights into the subtle energies of illness, began to gather specific herbs from the snow-covered slopes, herbs rarely used, their properties almost forgotten. He would bring them to the healers, silently placing them on their tables, his eyes conveying their purpose. The healers, initially skeptical of the silent boy and his strange offerings, eventually tried the herbs out of desperation. And to their astonishment, the remedies worked. The fevers broke, the villagers slowly recovered, their strength returning with each passing day. Eirik did not seek credit, but the healers, humbled and grateful, began to seek his quiet counsel, recognizing a wisdom beyond their own. His silence, once a source of fear, became a source of strength, a testament to his deep inner world. The villagers learned to listen to him in a new way, not with their ears, but with their hearts, interpreting his gestures, his gaze, the subtle shifts in his presence. They understood that Eirik's silence was not an absence of voice, but a different kind of communication, a language of intuition and empathy. As Eirik grew into a young man, his quiet presence became a cornerstone of Hrafnsvik. He was the one they turned to when the fishing was poor, when the crops failed, when a child was lost in the vast wilderness. He would consult with his ravens, listen to the whispers of the land, and then, with a silent gesture or a subtle shift of his gaze, he would guide them, always gently, always effectively. Hugin and Munin, his constant companions, continued to bring him knowledge from the far corners of Midgard and even glimpses of other realms. They showed him the quiet beauty of Alfheim, the realm of the light elves, and the deep stillness of Jotunheim's ice caves. These visions, serene and awe-inspiring, deepened Eirik's understanding of the interconnectedness of all things, reinforcing his sense of purpose as a guardian of balance. The villagers, in turn, began to shed their old superstitions. They learned that fear was born of ignorance, and that true wisdom lay in understanding, in connection, in embracing the unseen forces that shaped their world. They taught their children not to fear the ravens, but to respect them, to see them as messengers of the All-Father, guides to hidden knowledge. Eirik's life was a testament to the power of quiet strength, of unwavering purpose, and of the transformative nature of acceptance. He had once been an outcast, feared and shunned. But by embracing his unique gift, by listening to the silent wisdom of the ravens, and by using his divine magic for the good of his community, he had become their silent protector, their wise counsel, their beloved son of Odin. As the years passed, Eirik grew into an elder, his hair streaked with silver, his face etched with the lines of quiet contemplation. He still did not speak human words, but his eyes held the vast, ancient wisdom of Odin himself, a calm, knowing gaze that encompassed the entire world. He would sit by the hearth, surrounded by his grandchildren and the children of the village, telling stories not with his voice, but with his hands, with his eyes, with the subtle gestures that conveyed profound truths. Hugin and Munin, though ancient themselves, remained his faithful companions, their dark forms often perched on his shoulders, their silent cause a comforting presence. They were more than just birds, they were extensions of his own being, his thought and memory, guiding him, as they had guided the All-Father, through the intricate tapestry of existence. And so, the village of Hrafnsvik flourished, a sanctuary of peace and understanding in the wild north. Its people lived in harmony with the land, with the sea, and with the unseen forces that shaped their world. They had learned that true leadership came not from loud pronouncements, but from quiet wisdom, not from force, but from compassion. And at the heart of their community was Eirik, the boy who spoke to ravens, the silent guardian whose divine magic, once feared, had brought enduring peace and a deep sense of belonging to all. His story became a timeless lullaby, whispered by parents to their children, a gentle reminder that even in silence, there is immense power, and in acceptance, true strength. The legacy of Eirik, the silent guardian, permeated every aspect of life in Hrafnsvik. His quiet wisdom had not only saved the village from physical harm, but had also healed the deeper wounds of fear and prejudice that had once divided its people. The longhouses, once places of hushed whispers about the cursed boy, now resonated with a different kind of quiet, a peaceful hum of contentment, a shared sense of security. The very air seemed lighter, cleansed of past anxieties, carrying the fresh scent of pine and the distant, comforting murmur of the sea. The children of Hrafnsvik, growing up under Eirik's gentle influence, were raised with an innate respect for all living things and a profound understanding of the interconnectedness of their world. They were taught to observe, to listen, and to feel the subtle energies that flowed through the land. Instead of fearing the dark forests, They explored them with curiosity, learning the names of the plants and the habits of the animals. They learned to interpret the calls of the wild birds, not as mere sounds, but as messages, a part of the grand conversation of nature. The ravens, Hugin and Muninn, became revered figures in the village, their daily presence a source of quiet reassurance. They would often perch on the communal well or on the highest points of the longhouses, their dark eyes observing the comings and goings of the villagers. Their caws, once unsettling, were now understood as greetings or as subtle indications of shifts in the weather, or even as gentle reminders to be mindful of the day's tasks. The villagers would leave out small offerings of grain or dried fish for them, a silent gesture of gratitude and respect. Eirik, in his elder years, spent much of his time by the fjord, sitting on a smooth, sea-worn rock, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He was often surrounded by the younger generations, who would sit quietly at his feet, absorbing his silent teachings. He would demonstrate, with gentle gestures, how to mend a fishing net with the strongest knot, how to identify the safest paths through the treacherous mountain passes, or how to soothe a frightened animal. His hands, though aged, moved with a grace that spoke of a lifetime of harmony with the world. His connection to Odin, the All-Father, was not a matter of boastful display, but a quiet, internal truth. He felt the ancient wisdom of the god flowing through his veins, not as a burden, but as a guiding light. He understood that Odin's pursuit of knowledge was not for power, but for balance, for understanding the intricate tapestry of fate. And Eirik, in his own way, contributed to that understanding by living a life of quiet observation and compassionate action. The village feasts, once marked by boisterous tales of Viking raids and heroic battles, now included quieter narratives. Ragnar's successors, inspired by Eirik's example, began to tell stories of the land's endurance, of the silent wisdom of the ancient trees, of the gentle power of the geothermal springs, and of the subtle magic that permeated their daily lives. These tales, delivered in calm, steady voices, invited introspection and a deeper appreciation for the simple beauty of their existence. The concept of silence itself underwent a transformation in Hrafnsvik. It was no longer associated with fear or absence, but with contemplation, with listening, with a deeper form of communication. The villagers learned to appreciate moments of stillness, to find comfort in the quiet hum of the hearth, the soft patter of rain on the roof, or the distant murmur of the sea. They understood that true understanding often came not from spoken words, but from unspoken connections, from the subtle language of the heart and the spirit. Eirik's legacy was not built on monuments or grand pronouncements, but on the quiet transformation of a community. He had shown them that embracing what was different, what was misunderstood, could lead to unforeseen strengths. He had taught them that fear could be overcome by empathy, and that true protection came from harmony with the world, not from dominance over it. His life was a living testament to the gentle power of acceptance. As the final winter of his long life settled over Hrafnsvik, blanketing the village in a soft, silent snow, Eirik sat by his hearth. Hugin and Muninn perched on the rafters above, their dark eyes reflecting the dancing firelight. He felt a gentle weariness, a sense of completion. He looked at the faces of his family, his friends, his community, their eyes filled not with sorrow, but with quiet gratitude and a deep, peaceful understanding. He closed his eyes, and the whispers of the ravens filled his mind, not with new information, but with a symphony of memories, the parched earth, the first gentle rain, the grateful faces of his people, the countless dawns spent in silent communion with Hugin and Muninn. He felt the ancient blood of Odin flowing through him, not as a rush of power, but as a calm, steady current of wisdom. His breathing slowed, becoming softer, blending with the gentle crackle of the fire. Hugin and Muninn shifted on the rafters, there caused a soft, comforting murmur. And then, with a final, peaceful exhalation, Eirik's spirit gently departed, carried on the silent wings of thought and memory, returning to the vast, encompassing wisdom of the Allfather. The next morning, the village awoke to a world bathed in a soft, ethereal light. The snow had ceased, and the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. Hugin and Munnin circled high above Hrafnsvik, their forms shimmering faintly. Then, with a final, silent dip of their wings, they vanished into the boundless heavens. Their departure was not a loss, but a quiet affirmation that Eirik's journey was complete and his legacy would endure. Solveig, now the elder, stood at the entrance of the longhouse, her face serene. She looked at the sky, then at her people, and a gentle smile touched her lips. She knew that Eirik was not truly gone. His spirit lived on in the quiet strength of their community, in the wisdom of the ravens, in the enduring peace that permeated Hrafnsvik. And from that day forward, whenever the ravens flew over Hrafnsvik, or when a moment of unexpected calm settled over the village, the people would remember Eirik, the boy who spoke to ravens, the silent guardian. His story became a timeless lullaby, whispered by parents to their children, a gentle reminder that even in silence, there is immense power, and in acceptance, true strength, and that the unseen threads of connection weave all life into a single, harmonious tapestry. The very air of Hrafnsvik, now consistently infused with a palpable sense of peace, seemed to hum with the quiet energy of Eirik's legacy. It was a stillness that was not empty, but rich with unspoken understanding, a calm that settled deep within the bones of every villager. The scent of wood smoke from the hearths mingled with the crisp, clean air of the fjord, creating an atmosphere of profound tranquility and security. The village was not merely a collection of longhouses, it was a living testament to the power of harmony, a sanctuary in the wild northern lands. The children of Hrafnsvik, growing up in this era of deep peace, developed an extraordinary sensitivity to their surroundings. They learned from a young age to interpret the subtle language of nature, guided by the elders who had been taught by Eirik. They understood the rustle of the leaves as a whisper of the forest spirits, the ebb and flow of the tides as the steady breath of the sea, and the calls of the wild birds as ancient songs. Their play was often quiet and observant, mimicking the movements of the animals or arranging stones and twigs into intricate patterns that mirrored the wisdom of the land. They learned that true strength came from connection, not from dominance, and that the greatest adventures were often found in quiet contemplation. The ravens, Hugin and Munnin, though no longer visibly present in their daily forms, remained a powerful, symbolic presence in the collective consciousness of Hrafnsvik. Their names were spoken with reverence, their wisdom invoked in moments of decision or contemplation. The villagers continued to leave small offerings for them, not out of fear, but out of gratitude, acknowledging the unseen guardians who watched over their community. The image of the two ravens, one representing thought and the other memory, became a powerful emblem of balanced wisdom, guiding the villagers in their approach to life. Eirik's influence, even in his absence, continued to shape the very fabric of Hrafnsvik. His silent communication had taught them the value of active listening, of paying attention to the unspoken, to the nuances of gesture and gaze. This fostered a community where empathy was a core value, where understanding was sought before judgment, and where differences were embraced as sources of unique strength. Disputes were resolved not through loud arguments, but through quiet deliberation with all voices, even the silent ones, being heard and respected. The village elders, now guided by Solveig and her successors, continued the tradition of storytelling by the hearth. But their narratives shifted, emphasizing not just the heroic deeds of warriors, but the quiet courage of those who lived in harmony with nature, the subtle magic of everyday life, and the enduring peace found in community. The stories of Eirik became central to this new tradition, tales of an orphan who, through his silence and his connection to the divine, had brought salvation and lasting tranquility to his people. These stories were told in calm, resonant voices, their rhythm blending with the crackle of the fire, lulling listeners into a state of serene contemplation. The concept of divine magic in Hraftspik also evolved. It was no longer seen as something distant and awe-inspiring, but as an inherent part of the natural world, accessible to those who lived in harmony with it. Eirik had shown them that magic was not about grand spells or flashy displays, but about subtle resonance, about understanding the underlying currents of energy that flowed through Midgard. It was the magic of a healing touch, of a guiding instinct, of a deep connection to the earth and sky. The long northern winters, though still challenging, were faced with a quiet resilience. The villagers found solace in the warmth of their longhouses, in the shared companionship around the hearth, and in the knowledge that the unseen guardians watched over them. The aurora borealis, when it danced across the sky, was no longer just a spectacle, but a living presence, a direct connection to the cosmic tapestry that Eirik had understood so well. Its shimmering colors brought not just wonder, but a deep sense of peace, a reminder of the boundless beauty that permeated the universe. Eirik's legacy was a testament to the transformative power of acceptance. He had been an outcast, feared for his differences. But by embracing his unique gifts and using them for the good of his community, he had shown them that true strength lay in unity, in understanding, and in the quiet courage to be oneself. His life became a living example of Odin's wisdom, that knowledge and understanding, gained through quiet observation and deep connection, were the greatest treasures of all. And so, the village of Hraftspik flourished, a beacon of peace and harmony in the wild north. Its people lived in quiet accord with the land, with the sea, and with the unseen forces that shaped their world. The rhythm of life was a continuous lullaby, a testament to balance, compassion, and enduring harmony. The whispers of the sky were eternal, carrying the story of Eirik, the boy who spoke to ravens, forever onward, a gentle, unending narrative of the North, a perpetual lullaby for a world in slumber, a testament to the enduring peace found in the heart of nature. His spirit, intertwined with the very essence of Hraftspik, continued to guide them, a silent, benevolent presence in every rustle of leaves, every murmur of the sea, and every quiet moment of contemplation.